In this demonstration, we're going to take a look at some simple expressions. Now, the concept of an expression in reporting services is very pervasive. Whether you're designing very simple reports or very advanced and complex reports, you're going to use expressions at different levels. Now, simply by selecting fields or creating groups, we've already created expressions, and the designer has just created them for us implicitly. So let's just take a look at a couple of expressions. If I select this quantity text box and right-click and then choose expression, this opens the expression builder, and you can see that this abbreviated text right here actually represents a Visual Basic.NET expression. So it's actually just a little piece of code that calls the sum function and then references a field or a member of the fields collection called sum_quantity and then returns the value property for that field. Now let's play with this a little bit more. The same expression at different group levels is going to yield a different result because all of the records for the states within a month get summed up here, and then all of the records for not only a state but all of the months get summed up here. So reporting services is pretty smart about how it applies that sum function in the expression. However, we can modify its default behavior by doing something like this. I'm just going to add a column to the right, and I'm going to take this expression, copy it, and paste it in that cell. I'll go ahead and just make that big enough to give us some room. I'll resize my report just a little bit, and no doubt I get the same value because I copied the same expression, but I can modify the default behavior of the sum function by giving it the name of a group. If you look at my group names down here, we're currently at the state province level because I'm also grouping a state province at the detail level, and I want to modify this so that the sum applies to the month group. And we'll run that, and notice that the value in this column for every single state is the same as the sum for the month because I've explicitly told it to aggregate at the month level. Well, that's not very interesting to repeat that value over and over again, but what might be interesting is calculating the percentage of the total that the sum for a particular state represents. And to do that, I can modify the expression. I'll copy this, go back and change this expression to the default where it's just going to sum at that level, and then I'll divide that by the other expression that I had created earlier. Go ahead and add a carriage return so that's a little easier to read. So now I'm going to get the sum of the total excluding tax at the state level for this row divided by the sum at the month level, and that's going to give me a percentage. Now it's formatted as dollars right now, so let's change that. So I'll just choose this cell and I'll change the format to a percentage, and then I'll call this percent of month. So if you were to add up all of these percentage values, they would add up to 100%. So that's one example of a simple expression. Another way that expressions can be used are to set properties. Now I'm going to introduce a more advanced element of the designer here. I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to show the Properties window. Let's go ahead and resize the Report Builder window since we're taking up a little more space now. And you'll see that every single object, text boxes, the table, columns, Everything in the report has several different properties, and I can modify those properties using expressions. So, for example, let's change the color property for this cell, that text box, which is called sum total excluding tax. I'm going to change the color property using an expression. An expression always begins with equals. I'm going to call the immediate if function. That's IIF. So I'll go ahead and just recreate the same expression that is on the value of that cell, which is the sum excluding tax. If that is greater than 200,000, then I want the color to be green. Otherwise, I want it to be black. All right, so now we see that the larger values are in green. Let's say that if it's less than 50,000, that I want, choose that cell again, go to the color property, choose expression, and then I can extend this expression and say, if it's not greater than 200,000, then another immediate if, I can now copy and paste, that is less than 50,000, then it should be red. Otherwise, it will be black. And then I need a closing parenthesis because that is my inner immediate if function call. This is the outer immediate if function call. And now you're saying if it's over 200,000 there in green, if it's under 50,000, then the values are in red. One more example. Let's say that I'm a sales manager and I manage all of the sales for the states of Oregon and Washington. And I would like those rows for my states to be highlighted in yellow. So I'm going to choose across all of these cells. And I'll change the background color. I can see that it's down here under fill, but I'm going to sort properties in alphabetical order. So if I were to just choose the yellow background, then of course all rows are going to have a yellow background. But if I choose an expression, then again I can use an immediate if statement. I'll just enter a carriage return for that and say if state province is equal to Washington, or I'm going to copy and paste state province is equal to Oregon, then it will be yellow, otherwise it will be white. And now, as you can see, Oregon and Washington are highlighted in yellow. So this is just a very simple example of some of the rudimentary things that we can do with expressions. Later you'll see how expressions can be used in more advanced scenarios and used alongside things like parameters to add sophisticated capabilities to your reports.